Hello and welcome to Critical Political Thinking. My name is CAMASSO, and this is episode 2 of our election 2020 coverage. We've been asked to bring forth the accomplishments of both presidential candidates, both Joe Biden and Donald Trump. So we've reached out to both candidates' offices and their campaign headquarters, and we've requested lists of these accomplishments. We've gone over these lists. We've had these lists fact-checked by both sides, and we are now prepared to present those two lists to you. So once again, my name is CAMASSO with Critical Political Thinking, and welcome to episode number 2 of our continued 2020 election coverage. Hello and welcome to Critical Political Thinking and our continued election coverage of the 2020 most important election of our lifetimes. Today, we are going to be taking a little bit different format because usually we don't use cheat sheets. But today there are so many factual, important accolades that these two candidates have completed, and we felt it very important to show the accolades on just what these two candidates have completed in their political careers. Now, it's important to understand that both of these lists were sent by the campaign. So it's basically everything that they're proud of and everything that they could possibly include on a list. We had these lists fact-checked, and frankly, both were dead on. Apparently, they had them fact-checked as well. There were a few things that we were going to omit, mostly from the Trump campaign, to be honest. And now, it's also important to understand, and once we go over these accolades, and once you find the sheer number for both candidates, keep in mind, Joe Biden has been a candidate, well, not a candidate, but a political, a politician, I should say, for 16 times longer than Donald Trump. 16 times longer than Donald Trump. But both have great accomplishments, and without further ado, let's go over those accomplishments. We're going to start with Joe Biden, the presidential nominee for the Democratic Party. Joe Biden served in the United States Senate and the House for 30 years. He was on 2 committees, and he was both ranking member and chairman for, the Senate Foreign Relations Committee and the Senate Judiciary Committee. Joe Biden, while he was in the Senate and the House, passed 167 pieces of legislation. Now, it's important to understand he didn't pass 167 legislation pieces. He voted on 167 legislative pieces that passed. He didn't author the majority of those. As a matter of fact, I think he authored maybe 2 or 3. So it's very important to understand that a lot of these accolades that I'm going to be discussing of Joe Biden were either while he was part of something, not something he authored by himself, which is, in comparison to Donald Trump, pretty much the opposite. And as far as while he was vice president, these are a lot of things that he authored. And we're going to dictate between the difference of authored and assisted. So that's where our fact-checking came into play. While he was vice president, he was essential in helping getting Obamacare passed. Now, you can look at this as a positive or a negative, depending on how Obamacare has affected you directly. He had the Recovery Act passed, which was the act that oversaw and implemented the beginning of the recovery from the 2008 recession, which was a great thing. And we do have to give Joe Biden and Barack Obama credit for the initiation of that process. He brought forth gay marriage to the forefront, and under their administration, they did pass and make gay marriage a thing. And like I said, that's something you can either agree with or disagree with, but that is one of his accomplishments. He oversaw infrastructure spending on the counteraction of the Great Recession. So not only did he start the act, but he basically oversaw and made sure that government spending was limited in an ability to recover. He helped formulate United States policy towards Iraq. This policy was basically, we'll withdraw our troops if you call peace in the Middle East. And for a little bit it worked, but as you can tell from now, there was still never really peace in the Middle East, and now finally we're starting to see these bills get put into place now under a different administration. Violence Against Women's Act. That is a very important thing that he did. He did file and give women a lot more rights as far as, rape and assault and so on and so forth, and it did give women more backing in their claims. He also put in place the Federal Rape Shield Law, which is another great law that he did implement. And he also was very key in assisting in getting legal aid. So, attorneys and whatnot at no charge to those that are victims of domestic abuse. So these are all really good things. He did fund the victim assistance services like rape crisis centers and hotlines. So that's another, great thing that he put together. He put together programs to meet the needs of immigrant women and women of different races and ethnicities. Now, as they say this, he put together programs, but they haven't really been able to issue any direct, nor have we been able to find. So what I'm guessing is the Barack Obama administration implemented a few things, and he's claiming he was part of that. Protections for victims who were evicted from their homes because of events related to domestic violence or stalking. That is, if your husband beat you, he was removed from the house, you don't have any money to live there, now there is funding available. That is something that came under Barack Obama's administration and apparently Joe Biden assisted with. He worked to pass the Matthew Shepard and James Byrd Jr. Hate Crimes Prevention Act. This is historic legislation that expanded hate crimes laws to include crimes based on one's actual or perceived gender, sexual orientation, gender identity, or disability. So basically, they extended the hate crimes to cover LGBTQ and all of those included under those acronyms. He repealed the Don't Ask, Don't Tell Act, which was under Obama-Biden administration, which was a discriminatory policy to allow gay, lesbian, and bisexual members of the armed services. And we're going to talk about this a little bit later. That was later repealed under the Trump administration. So depending on what side of the field you're on, that may have a lot to do with who you're going to choose as a candidate. And that is why we're creating this video, because it's very important for you to understand where these candidates stand and what they've done as politicians rather than what they're claimed they're going to do. Because anybody can claim anything. Let's see what they've done. So they defended the equal benefits to same-sex couples, meaning they, always fought for gay rights and whatnot, and they wanted to ensure that they too were able to be just as miserable married as heterosexual couples. He was the original co-sponsor of the Employment Non-Discrimination Act, which prohibited bias and discrimination based on sexual orientation in employment. If you're getting a pattern here, that's because there is a pattern here. As you can tell, the liberal left has been very strong towards gay rights, towards gay rights in the military. They've been very strong towards very liberal views, and they're forming farther left as things progress. They launched the first Joe Biden launched the first comprehensive national HIV/AIDS strategy. And his early support for the HIV/AIDS resources has been long-fought access to the treatment for people with HIV/AIDS is dated back all the way to 1987 when he began his fight for the AIDS process. He co-sponsored the Ryan White Comprehensive AIDS Resource Emergency Care Act, which provides life-saving treatment and care to low-income, poor, and uninsured people living with HIV. So he's providing a lot of medication and whatnot throughout his career. He did fight for the rights of people who were affected with this disease. Insurance companies must cover pre-existing conditions was something that happened under Joe Biden's and Barack Obama's supervision. And for children to stay on their parents' health care until the age of 26 is another accomplishment listed under Joe Biden. They now require health plans to disclose how much of premium goes to patient care. And you're going to later find that they requested this, but that's something that came to fruition under the Donald Trump administration, but that is something he requested, so we're going to give him credit for the request, as well as cutting prescription drug costs for Medicare recipients only by 50%. Medicare, it's important to understand Medicare, because in the future we're going to talk about another candidate and what they did for Universal. They worked with Obama to institute the toughest Wall Street reform since the Great Depression, and this Wall Street reform led to a decline in the stock market. It's important to understand. So if you are looking for free trade, stock market, and things like that to increase, it's very important to understand that the majority of stock analysts would predict under a Joe Biden administration as much as a 25% decrease. That's important. So if you are for your 401k, you are for future and stock and business and growth, then perhaps you need to reevaluate a Joe Biden choice. And finally, they expanded the state-run health insurance to cover additional 4 million kids under the chip. So, I apologize, and one more. Insurance companies can no longer drop you when you get sick. So those are very important things that the Joe Biden Joe Biden has implemented under either his vice president administration or through his various political endeavors. Now, it's important to understand that that entire list spans 48 years. So in 48 years, that's what he's done. That is what he has brought to the table. All right. So now it's important to understand. Let's move on to Donald Trump and go over the accomplishments sent to us by his campaign. All right. So the Trump list is very important to understand, was sent, like I said, by the Trump campaign, and let's get that going. So Trump recently signed 3 bills to benefit Native Americans, and that is absolutely accurate. In effect, he gave compensation to the Spokane tribe for their loss of lands in the mid-1900s, to fund the native language programs, as well as a third to give the Little Shell tribe of the Chippewa Indians, finally give them their title as a valid Native American tribe. He finalized the creation of the Space Force, which is our official 6th branch of military service, and it's important to understand that, as you understand, people are even concerned about climate change as we move closer to the sun, this, that, and the other thing. It's important to know that we need to find their origins, and the Space Force is a substantial thing that can not only monitor, the orbit and satellites and whatnot, but it's also going to monitor interstellar as well as future space and NASA missions. He signed a law to make cruelty to animals a federal offense, a felony. That's right, a felony. That's amazing, and I think that anyone that loves animals would agree 100 times over that it should have been a felony since day one. Violent crime has fallen every year since President Trump has been in office, with the exception of the 2 years before he got into office. It was at a decline, it was at an increase. So for the last 2 years of the Obama administration, and that's Joe Biden as well, that means the last 2 years were at an increase, and not until Donald Trump took office did it start to go at a decrease, and has been at a decrease every year since. Trump has signed the latest bill making CBD and hemp 100% legal in the United States, which has aided in anxiety, that has aided in seizure disorder, so many different things. Trump's EPA gave $100 million to fix the water infrastructure problem in Flint, Michigan. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that, but there was a toxin that got into the water in Flint, Michigan that caused cancer, carcinogens, and frankly, no one took care of it. Finally, Donald Trump stepped in and took care of it. Under Trump's leadership in 2018, the U.S. surpassed Russia and Saudi Arabia to become the world's largest producer in crude oil, making us energy independent, which is another substantial Trump accomplishment. Trump signed a law ending the gag orders on pharmacists that prevented them from sharing money-saving information. As I discussed before, this is huge. Pharmacists were no longer able to tell you, we have a generic of this, or maybe you can try an over-counter of this. Now they can. They removed that gag order, blocking Big Pharma from basically locking in their absorbent costs. And that's going to substantially reduce the cost of the pharmacy in the future. And that is huge to understand. Trump signed the Allow States and Victims to Fight Online Sex Trafficking Act, FOSTA, as well as the Stop Enabling Sex Traffickers Act, SESTA, both giving law enforcement and victims new tools to fight sex trafficking, and basically laxed online rules and regulations and entrapment laws in order to catch these sex traffickers and, statutory rapists and whatnot. Another phenomenal act. Trump signed a bill to require airports to provide spaces for breastfeeding mothers. Another great thing. Not huge, but something to note. The 25% lowest paid Americans, that's the 25% lowest compensated Americans in our country, got a 4.5% income boost in November of 2019 as compared to November of 2018. That outpaced an only 2.9% gain in the country's highest paid earners. So what that means is, under a Trump economy, even the lowest earners are now making more of an increase than those in the highest bracket. So they're saying, the tax them more. Under Trump's administration, everyone is doing better. Low-wage workers are benefiting from higher minimum wages from corporations that are increasing entry-level pay, meaning now that there's a surplus of jobs, they now have to pay more to get that employee. And that's what we're talking about. That's bolstering the low wage. It's bringing it right up to where Americans can survive on a single job 40 hours. Trump signed the biggest wilderness protection and conservation bill in a decade and designated 375,000 new acres as protected land. So to those that say climate change, this, that, and the other thing, he's doing what he sees fit and what the science is backing. Trump signed the Save Our Seas Act, which funded $10 million per year to clean tons of plastic and garbage out of the sea, something nobody bothered to do, and yet now under a Trump administration it's been complete. He signed a bill this year allowing some drug imports from Canada, so once again, prescription prices are coming down because now we can have competition. And while it's bad to have non-American brands, but that wasn't the case anyway. A lot of these drugs were imported to begin with, and now that we can import from Canada, where they have a universal healthcare system where at least prescriptions are lower, whereas universal healthcare is great, but it doesn't benefit you when you actually have to go see someone. It only benefits you for prescriptions and little things like that. Trump signed an executive order this year that forces all healthcare providers to disclose the cost of their services so that Americans can comparison shop, which I said before, that was initiated under the Biden and Obama administration, but they couldn't get the job done. The Trump administration did. So while I did give Biden credit for initiating it and thinking of it, Trump was able to complete it. When signing that bill, he said no American should be blindsided by bills for medical services they never agreed to in advance, and added that in as well. So that means that unless it's something that you pre-arrange with your physician before completing those services, you can't be blindsided with that bill. Hospitals will now be required to post their standard charges for services, which is amazing because now you can't, not only can you comparison shop if you don't have insurance or you want to use your insurance and keep, co-pays at a minimum, so on and so forth, you now have that option and that ability, as under Obamacare that was very restricted. In the 8 years prior to President Trump's inauguration, prescription drug prices increased by an average of 3.6 per year. Under Trump, under the last 10 months, they've had a 1.1% drop for the first time in a long time. He created a White House VA hotline to help veterans and principally staffed it with veterans to give veterans a job. And because they have a better understanding of the PTSD and whatnot that veterans can go through, this is something that's implemented through the White House and in my opinion is phenomenal. The VA employees are being held accountable for poor performance. So back in the day, VA was very unionized, not unionized, but protected under what they were punished for. And now they're being held accountable, and our veterans are now getting better health care as a result. He issued an executive order requiring the Secretaries of Defense, Homeland Security, and Veterans Affairs to submit a joint plan to provide veterans access to mental health treatment. Once again, the mental health of our soldiers has been let go for so long, and finally under a Trump administration it's being addressed. Because of the bill signed and championed by Trump in 2020, most federal employees saw their pay increased by 3.1%, which is the largest raise in more than 10 years. And while that doesn't benefit everyone, in the long run it will, because that bolsters an economy. I mean, people need to understand the way an economy works to understand what really bolsters it. Trump signed into law up to 12 weeks of paid parental leave for millions of federal workers, giving parents the option to stay home with their newborn, which is another great thing. And both parents, not just one. Trump administration will provide HIV prevention drugs for free to 200,000 uninsured patients for 11 years. That's covering past his presidency, which the Biden-Obama administration, while Biden has championed the HIV fight. This is something to add to the Trump administration and jumped right in there with it. So what he was known for, Trump is capable of doing as well. All-time record sales during the 2019 holidays. While that seems like not a big feat, it is a huge feat because retail was at an all-time low, and we needed to bolster that in the 2019 holiday, and the boost in our economy was certainly huge for that. Trump signed an order allowing small businesses to group together when buying insurance to success a better rate. That's phenomenal. I have a small business. I have 3 small businesses, and I was able to combine all 3 to get one plan, and now I'm saving over $200 a month. That's phenomenal. President Trump signed the Preventing Maternal Deaths Act that provided funding for states to develop mother mortality rates and to get a better understanding of mother mortality and to ensure that it's something that we can eradicate in the future from American births. In 2018, President Trump signed the groundbreaking First Step Act, a criminal justice bill that enacted reforms that made our justice system fairer and helped reform inmates successfully return to society. So basically, not only did he do this in 2018, before all these riots in BLM, he's been doing it all along. So, and that's important to understand. He is trying to reform people. So yeah, you punish them, you put them in jail, but you reform them. You don't just punish them, lock them up with other criminals, and then send them back out. You bring them back into society, you introduce them to society as a participating individual. The First Step Act reformed, it addressed inequities in sentencing laws that disproportionately harmed Black Americans and reformed mandatory minimums that created unfair outcomes. So basically, he expanded judicial discretion, allowing judges to understand backgrounds and whatnot. And through this First Step Act, he really did help African Americans and minorities not go to jail over a simple marijuana offense. It's now based on discretion rather than just sentencing principles. Over 90% of the people benefiting from retroactive sentencing reductions, which under the First Step Act, were Black Americans. 90% of the people benefiting from that act were Black Americans, and yet, for some reason, every year after year after year, the Black vote seems to go Democratic. But they're the only ones fighting against you. I don't get it. So, Trump increased funding for historically Black colleges and universities by more than 14%. Trump signed legislation forgiving Hurricane Katrina debt that threatened so many individuals and insurance companies throughout that entire Katrina situation. New single-family home sales are up 31.6% in October 29 compared just a year ago. So constant, steady increase, with the exception of the COVID, which was not Donald Trump. He didn't create the COVID, and he did everything in his power to prevent it. Well, not prevent it, but keep people calm enough to not create rushes, to not create issues, and to keep America safe. He did phenomenal. And if you did your own research, you knew just how serious everything was. But the people that weren't willing to do the research are the people that he kept calm, and that's what was essential. Let's see here. Trump received the Bipartisan Justice Award, a historically Black college, for his criminal justice reform accomplishments. So he got awards even at historically Black colleges for his judicial review and historic African American crime, not reduction, but sentencing reduction and assistance in reforming these people and having them help with the community rather than hurt it. The poverty rate fell to a 17-year low of 11.8% under a Trump administration. Poverty rates for African Americans and Hispanic Americans have reached their lowest levels since the United States began collecting such data. Lowest since we started counting. And you're telling me that under a Trump administration, African Americans are suffering? Where? How? When? Why? President Trump signed a bill that creates 5 national monuments, expanded several national parks, added 1.3 million acres of wilderness, and permanently reauthorized the Land and Water Conservation Fund. And yet he doesn't care about the environment. Has USDA committed $124 million to rebuild rural water infrastructure, which is going to aid substantially in the California wildfire situation, because they're the ones draining their ground of all the water. They're the ones that are now tapped into the Colorado River. Don't you see where the real problem is? Vegetation and the fact that you are draining the ground dry. Consumer confidence and small businesses confidence is at an all-time high. More than 7 million jobs have been created since Trump's election. 7 million, more than any other presidency. More Americans are now employed than ever recorded in history. That's right. More Americans have a job than ever before, and yet Trump is against jobs? More than 400,000 manufacturing jobs were created since his election. That means he brought back 400,000. Almost 500,000 jobs have come back to our country in the manufacturing realm alone. He appointed 5 openly gay ambassadors, which clearly states that he goes by merit rather than gender, race, sexual preference. That doesn't matter to him. If you're capable of completing the job, then you'll get the job. Trump ordered Rick Grenell, his openly gay ambassador to Germany, to lead a global initiative to decriminalize homosexuality across the globe. Through Trump's anti-trafficking coordination team, federal law enforcement have doubled convictions on human traffickers and increased the number of defendants charged by 75%, 3 times as many people. Trump's OMB published new anti-trafficking guidance for government procurements officials to more effectively combat human trafficking. Trump's Immigration and Customs Enforcement, Homeland Security investigated and arrested 1,588 criminals associated with human trafficking. 1,588 off the streets under a Trump administration. The Department of Health and Human Services provided funding to support the National Human Trafficking Hotline, which is something that Obama did as well. The hotline identified 16,862 potential human trafficking cases, up twice as many than under the Obama administration. Trump's DOJ provided grants to organizations that supported human trafficking victims, serving nearly 9,000 cases. The Department of Homeland Security has hired more victims assistance specialists, helping victims get resources and support than any other president. President Trump has called on Congress to pass school choice legislation that no child is trapped in a failing school because of his or her zip code. The president signed funding that in September of 2018 that increased funding for school choice by $42 million, now making schools work harder to keep the enrollment and to do what we need to provide a better education. The tax cut signed into law by President Trump promotes school choice by allowing families to use 529 college saving plans for elementary and secondary education. Under his leadership, ISIS has lost most of its territory and been largely dismantled. ISIS leader Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi was killed. Signed the first Perkins CTE reauthorization since 2006, actually, authorizing more than $1 billion for states each year to fund vocational and career educational programs, bolstering the education of our graduates. An executive order expanding of apprenticeship opportunities for students and workers. He issued an executive order prohibiting the United States government from discriminating against Christians or punishing expressions of faith. Now, I'm on 65. 65. Now, keep in mind, Biden had 42 sent to us by the campaign. I'm on 65, and the majority of these blow away the other candidate, just so you're aware. Let's go on. President Trump ordered a halt to United States tax money going into international organizations that fund or perform abortions, getting rid of abortion. He imposed sanctions on socialists in Venezuela who have killed their citizens. Oh yeah, that socialism, that great thing that everybody's talking about. Trump's even taking care of socialism in other countries. And you think he's going to allow it here? Finalized a new trade agreement with South Korea, something never done before. Made a deal with the European Union to increase U.S. energy exports in Europe. That's right, we're now exporting instead of importing. We're now a profitable, self-contained country. Withdrew from the U.S. in the job-killing TPP deal. Secured $250 billion in new trade and investment deals in China and $12 billion in Vietnam. He okayed up to $12 billion in aid for farmers affected by unfair trade. He had over a dozen U.S. hostages freed, including those Obama could not get freed. Trump signed the Music Modernization Act, the biggest change in copyright laws in decades, now giving the artist more rights. He secured billions that will fund the building of a wall at our southern border, something he promised since day one, and something while some people are opposed to. We need immigration reform. We need to secure ourselves. This is our country. We are American citizens. We fought very hard for that right, and we need to maintain that. Trump secured billions in his administration that's promoting the second chance hiring to give former inmates the opportunity to live crime-free lives and find meaningful employment. Like I said before, he has continuously fought for that. His DOJ and Board of Prisons launched a new Ready to Work initiative, which continues that initiative. 8,764 communities across the country have been designated as opportunity zones, giving breaks in taxes and bolstering the retail and appearance of many of our downtrodden communities. The opportunity zones are expected to spur $100 billion in long-term private capital investment. That's insane. And that's something this country really needs, and that's something only a businessman, not a politician, can do. Trump directed the Education Secretary to end Common Core, which is huge. If you know anything about the current education system, you gotta get rid of that. He signed a measure funding prevention programs for veteran suicide, another great veteran dedication. He signed the 9/11 Victims Compensation Fund into law, which is huge for all of the victims, and there are so many that are still suffering because of 9/11. Companies have brought back over $1 trillion from overseas, not only just in sales and business, but also in jobs. Manufacturing jobs are growing at the fastest rate in more than 30 years. The stock market all-time high. There's nothing higher than this stock market under a Donald Trump administration. The median household income has hit the highest level ever recorded. African American unemployment, all-time low. So the only time that's going to be a problem is if you don't want to work, if you want a handout. And I'm sorry, but that's not what America's about. Hispanic Americans, all-time low, because they're working. Everyone is working to a better America under a Donald Trump administration. Asian American, unemployment, all-time low. I see a pattern here. Women's unemployment rate, all-time low. Youth unemployment, 50-year low. So then, there it is. We've recorded the lowest unemployment ever. The pledge to Americans workers has resulted in employers committing to train more than 4 million Americans. 95% of U.S. manufacturers are optimistic about the future. As a result of the Republican tax bill, small businesses will have the lowest top marginal tax rate in more than 80 years, allowing small business to finally succeed. Record numbers of regulations eliminated that hurt small businesses. I've seen a ton myself. Signed welfare reform requiring able-bodied adults who don't have children to work or to look for work if they're on welfare. No longer just a free handout. You have to certify that you have been searching for a job and you have not been able to get that. And I think that's great. Under a Trump, the FDA approved more affordable generic drugs than ever, now getting America the care and the health care that they deserve, rather than they're forced to have under an Obamacare. Reformed Medicare program to stop hospitals from overcharging low-income seniors on their drugs, saving seniors hundreds of millions in the first year. Signed right to try legislation allowing terminally ill patients to try an experimental treatment that was not allowed before. Secured $6 billion in new funding to fight the opioid epidemic. That is huge. This country is dying from the opioid epidemic. I can tell you this firsthand. And trust me, that was huge. Signed a VA Choice Act and VA Accountability Act, expanded VA telehealth services, walk-in clinics, and same-day urgent primary and mental health care for our veterans. U.S. oil production recently reached an all-time high, so now we are no longer formally dependent on the Middle East. How great is that? The U.S. is net natural gas exporter for the first time since 1957. First time. NATO allies increased their defense spending because of his pressure campaign. Awesome. Withdrew the United States from the job-killing Paris Climate Accord in 2017, and the same year the U.S. still led the world by having the largest reduction on carbon emissions. That's that, environment thing he said he doesn't care about, and yet he has a gradual, not even gradual, a steady decline. He has had circuit court judge nominees being confirmed faster than any other administration, meaning he's picking the successful people to accomplish the job correct. He's had Supreme Court Justices Neil Gorsuch and Brett Kavanaugh confirmed. He moved the U.S. Embassy to Israel, from Israel to Jerusalem. That is huge. He moved it in Israel to Jerusalem. Do you know how big that is for peace? Now, just 2 days ago, he signed one of the largest peace deals ever. Well, he assisted and basically allowed and formulated this between the two countries, and that has literally done so much for both countries economically and spiritually. He agreed to a new trade deal with Mexico and Canada that will increase jobs here and money coming in, rather than going out like other administrations. He reached a breakthrough agreement with the EU to increase U.S. exports. He imposed tariffs on China in response to China's forced technology transfer. He signed legislation to improve the National Suicide Hotline. He signed the most comprehensive childhood cancer legislation ever into law. The Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, signed into law by Trump, doubled the maximum amount of the child tax credit to available parents. So if you have a child, you're now getting way more in taxes. You doubled that amount. So even under a Biden-Harris administration, where they're claiming they can give low income about $2,000 to a $4,000 increase, this goes away. So if you're doing the math, you're getting around a $700 to $800 increase. And after that, take into effect that now most large businesses are being taxed double, triple, if not more. Do you really think that your cost of product is now not going to quadruple exponentially as their taxes have? And do you think that measly $700, $800 is going to compensate the difference? Do your math, people. Let's see here. It also creates new tax credit for other dependents, now allowing people to claim more money for those that they are fiscally responsible for. In 2018, President Trump signed into law $2.4 billion funding to increase the Child Care and Development Fund, providing a total of $8.1 billion to states to fund child care for low-income families so they can get jobs, get in the workforce, and help their families. The Child and Dependent Care Tax Credit, signed into law by Trump, provides a tax credit equal to 20 to 35% of your child's expenses. That means 35% of what you average spend on your child you will get back from the government. $3,000 per child and $6,000 per family. And also, the FSAs allow you to set aside up to $5,000 in pre-tax deductible money to use for your child care. Another great thing. In 2019, Donald Trump signed the Autism Collaboration, Accountability, Research, Education, and Support Act, which allocated $1.8 billion into funding over the next 5 years to help people with autism spectrum disorder and to help their families. As new people are being diagnosed with this daily, it's important for us to understand the logistics of this disease, and this now paves the way for that. In 2019, President Trump signed into law 2 funding packages providing nearly $19 million in new funding for lupus education programs, as well as an additional $41.7 billion for the funding of National Institutes of Health to help lupus. Another upcoming accomplishment to add, in the next week or two, Trump will be signing the first major anti-robocall law, which will literally eliminate these robocalls that all of us literally almost have to turn our phones off anymore because we're just so sick and tired of getting these calls. And let's see here. Once again, the U.S. stock market continually hits all-time record highs under the COVID virus. And I'm not even including the COVID virus in his accomplishments because everyone says he failed. So fine, let's leave them out. Even with leaving them out, we're at 123 positives. Keep in mind, 3 years. 123 positives, all of which were substantially, or if not very close to as good as Joe Biden's. And most of Joe Biden's he didn't do by himself. He wasn't the initiator. He was only the compadre of Barack Obama. So there we have it. That's what you wanted. You said you wanted. What are his accomplishments? What has he done for America? What's Joe done for America lately? Interesting. So there you have it, folks. That's the election in a nutshell. Those are the 2 candidates, and that's what we have to look forward to. So, ladies and gentlemen, you make your own decision. That's what's so important about the United States, and that's what's so important about this next election. This is the most important election of a lot of our lifetimes, and the reason being these candidates could not be any further apart. They could not have any further difference in their ideals and objectives. So it's very important to understand we have a politician and we have an American. Well, both are American, but one is a simple American. One is literally a lifer politician. One person claims a million things and yet has had 48 years to accomplish those million things. And frankly, I gave you the list. It's not too impressive. And yet then you have another person that had no political experience, came in 3 years, changed everything, which is why everyone is so upset and trying to remove him, because literally their free ride is over. Pelosi now can't just sit there and enjoy her free ride. Now she actually has to do her job. God forbid. God forbid a businessman is holding these people accountable. So ladies and gentlemen, there you have it. This is where we stand as America. And if you still don't know who you're voting for, or you still think that Donald Trump is bad for America, please, 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 just open your eyes. Open your ears. And I'm not saying to the liberal media, I'm not even saying to mainstream media, don't listen to Fox News as much as I don't listen to CNN. Do you know who you should listen to? The White House. Listen to the government. Listen to Congress. Listen to the Senate. Pay attention to what these people are doing. Pay attention to who they're voting for and what they're voting for. Because they can say one thing. I can say a million things. It doesn't mean I'm going to do it. Go by action, America. And I just gave you the actions of both candidates. One, 16 times longer in service than the other. And frankly, a third of the accomplishments. There you have it, folks. The election 2020, I don't even know why it's a choice. Thanks for watching. My name is Corey CAMASSO, and this is Critical Political Thinking. Please know we are not paid for our services, so please like, please subscribe, and if you can, please make a donation. Thank you for watching. God bless America, and stay safe. My name is Corey CAMASSO, and this is Critical Political Thinking.